I'm Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky of the 9th District of Illinois, and I want to thank you all for being here. I take great pride today in introducing the International Violence Against Women Act, or IVAWA, together with my colleagues. IVAWA will make ending violence against women and girls a foreign policy priority of the United States. It will give the United States government new tools to promote the fundamental rights of women around the world. The figures are staggering. 1 in 3 women worldwide is beaten, that's about 1 billion women, beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused over the course of her lifetime. The United Nations reports that among women aged 15 to 44, acts of violence cause more death and disability than cancer, malaria, traffic accidents, and war combined. In some countries, up to 70% of women and girls are affected by violence. Women living in the midst of armed conflict, poverty, and instability face a particularly desperate situation. Last year, I traveled to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where rape has been used for over a decade as a low-cost, low-tech, and horrifically effective weapon of war. In the DRC, sexual violence has been systematically used to destroy communities and to instill a sense of despair and hopelessness within a population. Hundreds of thousands of women have been raped. Even here in the United States, women's rights are under threat. We've seen troubling efforts from Republicans to restrict women's access to reproductive health and family planning services. Earlier this week, Republicans voted down a bill to ensure women receive equal pay for equal work, and we've even seen an effort to redefine rape. That's why I'm extremely disappointed that after over a year of negotiations with my colleagues and the other side of the aisle, House Republicans refused to support IVAWA unless it included the global gag rule or other extremely restrictive abortion restrictions. I hope they will consider that position because this bill has nothing to do with abortion. Women's rights are human rights, and all women deserve the same fundamental rights, including a freedom from violence and abuse. But passing this bill is not just important from a humanitarian perspective. It's also important to our national security. It's no coincidence that the most dangerous places to be a woman are some of the most unstable and violent regions in the world. Studies have proven that investing in women and protecting their fundamental rights strengthen entire communities, and combating violence against women is a critical step toward promoting regional and global stability. The Obama administration has shown extraordinary leadership in bringing global women's issues to the forefront. And we have in the State Department a real focus on women and violence against women, but it is clear we do need to do more. We need to pass legislation that institutionalizes a comprehensive approach to preventing and responding to violence against women. IVAWA would require the development and implementation of a comprehensive U.S. strategy to prevent violence against women and girls internationally. It would promote health programs and survivor services, rule of law reform, and civil and criminal legal protections, educational opportunities for women and girls, and the promotion of economic opportunities for women. Passage of IVAWA would give us critical tools in the fight against gender-based violence around the world. I want to thank my colleagues who are here today, all of whom are incredible champions of the rights of women. I will now turn the podium over to Congresswoman Nita Lowey, the ranking member on the Appropriations, State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, which actually deals with this very issue. Nita?
I want to thank my colleague Jan Schakowsky for your very important work on this issue, and I'm so pleased to be here not only with Congresswoman Schakowsky, but our other colleagues who have been fighters and strong voices in protecting women and doing everything we can to change the current situation. Frankly, it is shocking that 1 in 3 women worldwide will be physically or sexually abused during her lifetime. Women and girls are victims of human trafficking, and rape is too often used as a weapon of war. The violence happens in every nation, every day, and we are here to say no more. We know the facts. Violence inhibits a woman's chance to live a healthy, safe, and productive life, and the ripple effects of this violence impacts every part of society. Approximately 1 in 4 women is abused during pregnancy. It can lead to miscarriage, preterm labor, low birth weight, fetal distress, and death. The risk of contracting HIV increases when a woman suffers, excuse me. The risk of contracting HIV and AIDS increases when a woman suffers from sexual violence. Abused and trafficked women and girls also miss out on opportunities for education, which is fundamental to economic growth and stability. Each additional year of school adds 10% to an individual's earning potential, and on a nationwide scale, boosts the country's GDP by 1%. When women are given opportunities to participate in the economy, children go to school, families thrive. We know that violence against women is perpetuated by poverty, a lack of education, and employment opportunity for girls, the dowry system, and the perceived lack of value of girls, factors that we can change. It's time for Congress to take a stand for women's rights worldwide. We must pass the International Violence Against Women's Act to enhance the State Department's tools to address violence against women through health and survivor services, legal reforms, economic opportunities, and education. This bill promotes working at individual, family, community, national, and international levels to take real and meaningful steps toward poverty reduction, economic development, and stability. Again, I want to thank Congresswoman Schakowsky and Congressman Berman and my other colleagues for your unwavering commitment to EVAWA. And I look forward to working with them to continue to urge Congress to pass this critical legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. We do have now 37 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. We're expecting to have more. I now want to introduce someone who it was just 2 weeks ago that we were together in Istanbul for a conference with mostly women, men as well, from over 110 countries, talking about women's access to health care and to reproductive services. And there is tremendous need around the world and tremendous commitment to doing that, but the United States can certainly help with the passage of IVAWA. So let me bring a great leader for women, Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you so much, Jan. And Jan is, there is no greater leader in this Congress for women's international rights, both abroad and their rights here at home. And as she said, she and I were honored to represent our country at this international conference that is really promoting many of the issues that are in the bill that Jan and Nita outlined. Let me say that this is important. Protecting women is the first important duty of and protecting your citizens is the first duty of any government. And there has been no greater friend to women around the world than the Obama administration, which created the Office of Global Women's Issues at the State Department to help integrate women's issues into U.S. foreign policy. And this bill will help bolster the administration's ability to protect women. The International Violence Against Women Act will bring internationally the protections that it has historically brought to women in our country since 1994 when it was first enacted. It was always a strong bipartisan effort. This bill in the past has been a strong bipartisan effort. And I commend Jan for trying to bending over backwards. She's been working on this the whole Congress, trying to make it a bipartisan effort, but she had to at some point move forward. But we've had problems passing the Violence Against Women Act here in our own Congress. It still has not been reauthorized. With certain areas, the Republicans feeling should not be given the coverage, such as the LGBT community and the women living on the Indian reservations and in some cases immigrants. So we not only have this effort across the world, we have it in our own country. Now the Republicans say there is no war against women, but I don't know what you call it, but if you look at the facts, all the casualties are women. Whether it's the Violence Against Women Act that has not been reauthorized, or the effort my good friend Rosa DeLauro had to support the Senate on the Fairness Protection Act. Apparently the Republicans are against fairness now in payroll. The efforts to roll back. It used to be we would have abortion fights. Now we're having fights over contraception and access to contraception, which is a consensus issue here in the United States. So we find these trends disturbing in our own country, but at the same time, Jan's leadership is not letting us forget that women worldwide are our sisters. And a very important point that she pointed out, I live in New York, so Homeland Security is always my top concern. Those countries that treat their women well, which this bill tries to do, protect and treat them well, are countries where there is less terrorism, where there is more education, where there is more health care for the family unit, therefore the whole economic unit, therefore the strength of the village, the strength of the community, the strength of the country. So this has a peace dividend to it, in addition to protecting half the population. We have to remember women hold up half the sky for half the population, and they need to be remembered here locally and internationally. I congratulate Jan for her extraordinary leadership and not giving up. And she's been working on it since day one of this caucus, or this Congress. Thank you, Jan.
And actually, the past two Congresses before, we've been working on this as well. I want to say, before I introduce our next speaker, one of the reasons for doing this press conference and for moving ahead with the International Violence Against Women Act is one of the things that Carolyn and I heard at this international conference, that there is an echo effect from the United States of America. And some of the more repressive pieces of legislation that affect women are being copied in other places around the world. And they say, see, even the United States is doing this. So we wanted to gather, our colleagues wanted to gather here to send a very strong message to the women of the world, to the nations of the world, that there are many of us in Congress who are standing up for the rights of women. It has been mentioned that Rosa DeLauro was the chief sponsor for almost 2 decades of the Paycheck Fairness Act, primed just to establish clearly into law with enforcement mechanisms that women will get equal pay for equal work. And so I invite my hero, Rosa DeLauro, to speak to this.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor really to be with you. And I thank you, Jan, for joining us on the Senate side with several of my other colleagues as we made our way to make a statement on paycheck fairness for women. We fell short, but the battle isn't over, and we will prevail on making sure that men, women, same job, same pay. It's as simple as that. I'm just honored to be with all of my colleagues today, and people have laid out what the legislation is about, but I think it's important to note that in the best-selling book, Half the Sky, Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wooden made a very compelling point. And this is a quote, in the 19th century, they argued, the paramount moral challenge was slavery. In the 20th century, it was totalitarianism. In this century, it is the brutality inflicted on so many women around the globe. Sex trafficking, acid attacks, bride burns, and mass rape. End quote. So in recent weeks, we have been pushing hard to get the majority to recognize the serious issues that face the women in our own country, talked about the Violence Against Women Act, to reauthorize that, the critical services, healthcare services attendant to that effort, and we also talked this morning about paycheck fairness. Sadly, our efforts have either been rejected or countered, as my colleague Jan Schakowsky pointed out, with policies that in fact harm women, that set them back, that in fact don't respect or value the role of women in our society today, and move to try to take women backward, and in many instances, humiliate. The challenges that women face around the world, particularly in the developing world, are even more immense. Acid is thrown in the faces of youngsters, young girls, on their way to school. Women must endure horrifying acts of genital mutilation, or they suffer from readily treatable diseases and conditions such as obstetric fistulas. Violence against women, whether it's mass rape in conflict zones like the Congo, domestic violence, or honor killings, is an abomination. We struggle, and I hope you will struggle with, those who are listening and covering this event, is that why? Why are we the victims of oppression and violence? Why do individuals believe, wherever they go, that they have the right to abuse women, to violate women, and that women somehow are not valued, not respected, that they are second-class citizens, not only in our country, but around the world? It's more than just a moral outrage. It is a human rights violation, a public health epidemic, a barrier to solving global challenges such as hunger, poverty, and AIDS, and a threat to national security. As Secretary Clinton has said, quote, "No nation can succeed in increasing security if it leaves out or leaves behind more than half the population." This bill, which my colleague Jan Schakowsky has been such a champion of, will work to coordinate our international efforts to combat violence against women. It will give the State Department new tools, health programs, legal reforms, survivor services, new opportunities for education, and economic empowerment. We know that women who have had economic opportunities experience less violence. They have more options to be able to face it. Research has shown that when women obtain access to those economic resources, they are more than twice as likely to invest in their communities as men in their societies. It is time that we awoke to what is the paramount moral challenge of our time, the slavery, if you will, of our time. Give the State Department the tools that it needs to stem violence against women around the world, increase their empowerment, foster development, increase our national security, and heed our basic morality. This is about a moral outrage which we are confronting here. And this is an investment that we have to make in the United States. And I thank Congresswoman Schakowsky. I thank my colleagues for being here today.
Thank you. To underscore the notion that this isn't just a battle that women need to engage in, first I want to mention that Howard Berman, Congressman Howard Berman, was one of the first three co-sponsors of this legislation, and today, again, someone who has been a champion, understands why this issue of violence against women internationally is so important, is my colleague from Missouri, Russ Carnahan.
Thank you, Jan. I'm really pleased to stand with my colleagues here today. My name is Russ Carnahan. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, ranking member of the Oversight Subcommittee. This absolutely is an issue that we need to take up now. Thank you, Jan, for being such a champion, and the others here today. Women's rights are human rights. Absolutely, they impact women, but it's also an issue for men. It's an issue for boys that need to be allies in this as well, because it makes all our communities better. Violence against women throughout the world remains a rampant problem, from rape as a weapon of war, to female genital mutilation, to so-called honor killings, and is an issue that I've been concerned with for many years. The numbers that you've heard today are staggering. Nearly 1 billion women abused during their lifetimes, with many losing their lives to abuse. A few weeks ago, I was really honored to join Bosnian women in their remembrance of the 20th anniversary of the siege of Sarajevo. These are women who not only endured the unimaginable horrors of armed conflict, but saw the depravity possible of humankind during war. Because of what they endured, they made the decision to get involved, to encourage peace wherever it was possible, and to make certain that what happened to women in their communities would never happen again. They talked about their ordeals. They were successful in forcing the first classification of rape as a war crime in an international war tribunal. Today we've come together to make the abuse of women and girls a priority for all of us, whether it's during wartime or in peacetime. This bill puts forth a comprehensive strategy to do just that. We live in a global society. We cannot grow in that society while half the population lives in fear of abuse, mutilation, rape, and even murder. So again, I just want to thank my colleagues for making this a priority issue and to really kick this conversation off together. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least is one of the strongest warriors we have for women's rights here at home and abroad. Someone who has been outspoken and so strong, and that is my dear friend and neighbor and colleague from Wisconsin, Gwen Moore.
Well, thank you all. As the co-chair of the bipartisan caucus on women's issues, I can tell you that one of the staggering, stunning, and most disappointing truths that we have discussed and realized is that violence against women is just standard around the world. And as my colleagues have pointed out, it is a main instrument of war. And this is something that is very, very concerning. So I think that while we've been discussing the Violence Against Women Act for the past couple of weeks, and realizing that violence against women is just as American as apple pie, it is just mere genius on the part of my colleague, Jan Schakowsky, to put together the International Violence Against Women Act, to give the State Department not only the tools that it needs to support countries to put together the legal framework and the supportive services and the funding network, but to make sure that violence against women is elevated to being a high priority of the United States of American foreign policy, to give it the stature that it needs for us to indeed combat worldwide violence against women. I can tell you that the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I would just paraphrase to say that this violence against women anywhere is a threat to our human rights everywhere. And this is just a scourge on the globe that violence against women is so pervasive. So I am so happy to be joining my colleagues today, and I suspect that we will have a bipartisan vote in favor of this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All of you should have a one-page summary of the legislation, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. We've talked about the tools for the State Department. It does make permanent an Office for Global Women's Issues in the State Department. Hillary Clinton has, leading in this fight right now, an ambassador at large for global women's issues, Melanne Verveer. But this would actually create a permanent office within the State Department, and not later than 1 year after IVAWA's passage, the Secretary of State and USAID administrator would implement a comprehensive 5-year international strategy to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls internationally, identifying at least 5 eligible countries that have severe levels of violence against women and girls. And believe me, there are many to choose from, that would look at health and legal and judicial protections, public attitudes, economic opportunities, educational opportunities. And finally, there would be foreign military training. Ensures that education on preventing and responding to violence is included in ongoing U.S. training for foreign military forces, police forces, and judicial officials. And with that, I would open it for questions. Questions from the press? Yes.
Considering how hard it's been to pass VAWA, they're still trying to negotiate how that's going to be passed. What's your expectation? What would need to be done for you guys to even be able to consider this?
Yes. Well, first of all, there are a couple of strategies. One is working with the Senate and hoping to move a bill in the Senate that would put some pressure on the House. And additionally, as my colleague Gwen Moore said, we want to really elevate and organize around this issue. We worked with a coalition of more than 100 organizations led by Women Thrive, Amnesty International, Futures Without Violence, a coalition of outside groups, not-for-profit organizations that are really organizing around this. In an election year, I think that's really important to elevate this issue and ask members of Congress to get on and support it. I felt like we were this close to getting some bipartisan support, and maybe that grassroots effort and and hopefully some Senate activity will push that over the edge. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues.